All right, we've got some breaking news from the United Kingdom and the royal family.
The British royal family has been rocked in recent days by a swirling wave of speculation surrounding Prince Louis, the youngest son of Prince William. Once a beloved figure who charmed the public with his playful antics, the young prince is now unexpectedly being described in strikingly new and unflattering terms: unstable, difficult to manage, and unsuited to the future of the monarchy. From a child who once stole the spotlight, Louis has increasingly vanished from major public events. When he does appear, it is often fleeting, a brief moment before he is swiftly ushered away, always closely accompanied, as though requiring special supervision or reassurance. This puzzling absence has fueled growing suspicion. On social media, old video clips are being edited and reframed in suspicious contexts, prompting many to question whether what the public sees is genuine or part of a carefully orchestrated narrative behind palace walls. Amid a series of shocking leaks, one name keeps surfacing at the center of this apparent image transformation campaign: Queen Camilla. According to sources close to the family, Prince William has never been more furious. And he has reportedly begun taking quiet but decisive steps that are sending tremors through the royal household. Is Queen Camilla truly behind efforts to cast William's son as a problem to be sidelined? And just how far is the future king prepared to go to shield Louis in what appears to be an unrelenting power struggle? In February 2026, London was engulfed in an unseasonal polar vortex. The abrupt shift in weather not only turned the British sky a dull gray, but also cast a pall of gloom deep into the corridors that were already too silent and rigidly formal. In the nursery suite, little Prince Louis, the youngest, most spirited son of Prince William, was battling a prolonged fever. At 7 years old, Louis had always been the embodiment of vitality, a burst of life that shattered the monarchy's stiff protocols. But this heavy cold had drained away his usual mischief. The boy lay curled beneath thick blankets, cheeks flushed with heat, tired eyes occasionally fluttering shut in delirious half-sleep. Louis's cries began in the middle of the night, first small hiccuping sobs, then long, relentless wails that refused to stop. In the vastness of the palace, where every footstep was measured and deliberate, those cries felt like an invisible rebellion. The most seasoned nannies, women who had raised generations of royals, found themselves powerless. They took turns applying cold compresses, singing the old lullabies. Yet Louis seemed deaf to everything. He was trapped inside a glass cage of pain and exhaustion, responding only by covering his ears or shoving away anyone who tried to touch him. To the loyal staff, that sight was heartbreaking. To the ambitious eyes watching from the shadows, it carried a very different shade. Into that atmosphere, Queen Camilla's presence arrived laden with implication. After decades spent transforming herself from the most reviled woman in Britain into the consort standing beside King Charles at the head of the monarchy, Camilla had forged a composure that was almost frightening. She understood better than anyone that in this palace, power resided not only in the crown itself, but in who controlled the narratives of succession. Her relationship with William's family had never gone beyond the bare minimum of polite surface courtesy. The distance traced back to wounds that had never truly healed after Princess Diana's death and had only deepened with the tremors set off by Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, in 2023. Camilla remained a keen, quiet observer, wielding considerable influence over the internal court of public opinion. That morning, she walked the corridor toward Louis's room. She paused at a tall window overlooking the inner courtyard, where the wind howled through bare branches. From somewhere distant, Louise's cries tore through the early quiet once more. A close media aide approached, head bowed to deliver a report. But Camilla raised a single hand in a small, silencing gesture. She stood there, eyes narrowed in thought. Her mind was not on the child's health. It was running over the line of succession again. Louis was fourth, after his father, after George, after Charlotte. Close enough to matter, far enough to be quietly erased, should any label of instability ever stick. The fragility he showed in fever, the excessive distress the nannies had just described, Camilla filed away like precious intelligence. She remembered the Platinum Jubilee in 2022, when Louis's cheeky antics on the Buckingham Palace balcony had delighted the world. Back then, it was called innocence. But Camilla knew that with only a shift in framing, innocence could just as easily become uncontrolled behavior. She twisted the ring on her finger slowly, a familiar tick whenever she was weighing a long game. From where she stood, she could see William's figure hurrying into his son's room. Exhaustion and worry carved plainly across his face after another sleepless night. William had always fought to shield his children from the media glare, a battle that felt increasingly hopeless in the digital age. Camilla allowed herself the faintest of smiles, one that never reached her eyes. She knew the greatest vulnerability of any father was fear for his child's future. She had no need to enter the room. She had already seen what she needed to see. She had already heard what she needed to hear. A silent calculation had begun inside the mind of a woman who had survived every rise and fall power could throw at her. In her world, a child's fever was never merely illness. It was the opening move of a shift. Inside the sick room, Louis finally slipped into fitful sleep, small hands still clutching the edge of his father's shirt. The boy had no idea that while the fever raged through his tiny body, another storm, far fiercer and more poisonous, was already gathering in the shadowed corridors of power, where compassion had always been the rarest luxury of all. In the weeks that followed, as Louis's fever finally broke, another kind of virus began to spread from deep within the palace, one invisible, yet far more destructive. It was the silence of calculation and the carefully engineered gaps in information. Louis started disappearing from the lists of royal family members attending the traditional early-year engagements. While George and Charlotte appeared poised and confident, the empty space beside them became a gaping question mark for the public and royal watchers alike. No official press release ever explained the absence. Instead, leaks began to surface in the form of anonymous whispers. Camilla, with the sharp instincts of someone who had spent half a lifetime steering the currents of public opinion, took her first deliberate steps. She never spoke directly. Instead, she relied on small, loaded gestures. During an afternoon tea with veteran media advisors, people who had owed her favors for decades, she quietly flipped through a folder of photographs, lingering longest on the shots of Louis with his hands clamped over his ears, face twisted against the roar of a crowd. Under her unspoken direction, old videos of Louis were resurfaced across social platforms, but reframed in an entirely new way. The playful moments, sticking out his tongue, bursting into carefree laughter, were now edited and juxtaposed with medical stock footage about emotional dysregulation or sensory overload. Visual filters darkened the colors, audio was slowed, transforming innocent childhood behavior into something strange and troubling. The first seeds of doubt had been planted in the fertile soil of public curiosity. Whenever Louis made one of his rare public appearances, the protective cocoon woven by William's family inadvertently became a trap. Nannies and aides constantly surrounding him, ready to whisk him away at the first sign of fatigue, were reinterpreted as special supervision. Camilla watched it all unfold from her office on banks of media monitors. She saw how journalists had begun to regard Louis not with affection, but with clinical scrutiny. Her gaze drifted across headlines hovering around the mental health of the future generation. A quiet satisfaction settling in as the palace's silence worked exactly as intended. In the private rooms, Louis remained simply a child on the mend, delighting in model airplanes and chasing the small dog through the garden. He had no idea that every time he laughed too loudly or grew cranky at being woken early, those moments were being noted by unsympathetic eyes. Some lower-ranking palace staff, influenced by the simmering rumors, started keeping their distance from the little prince. They looked at him warily, as though facing something fragile that might shatter or explode at any moment. Camilla understood that to ruin someone's future in the British royal family, a spectacular scandal was not required. It was enough to create a pervasive sense of unsuitability. She deftly wove concerns about the burden of the crown onto the shoulders of a fragile child. In private conversations, she frequently expressed feigned compassion, wondering aloud whether it was cruel to force a child showing signs of instability like Louis into public life. It was a vicious move, dispossession disguised as kindness. The mainstream media's silence during this period was itself a telling detail. No rebuttal ever came from Buckingham Palace, because Camilla had skillfully isolated the lines of communication. The absence of any firm statement about Louis's health allowed the wildest online theories to gain the weight of self-evident truth. Public debate shifted away from whether Louis was lovable and toward whether he was mentally capable of shouldering future responsibilities. The seeds had sprouted in the dark, and they were growing faster than anyone could have imagined, ready to strangle the last traces of innocence from a child who stood fourth in line to the throne. The hush that had settled over the mainstream press began to take on a suffocating quality. It was no longer the usual deference to royal privacy. It was a silence engineered with precision, a gleaming golden cage wrapped tightly around Prince Louis's image. At the major newsrooms along Fleet Street, the sharpest reporters received subtle directives, gentle but weighty suggestions to steer clear of digging into the youngest prince's absence. The very emptiness on the front pages acted as a toxic catalyst, funneling public curiosity down the shadowy alleys of social media where conspiracy theories sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Inside the palace, William started to sense the shift in the atmosphere. A man who had always maintained a cautious distance from the press after the tragedies of his past, he initially felt a measure of relief that his son was not being hounded. Yet the instincts of a future king, honed through decades of political intrigue, sounded an alarm. He realized the protection was too perfect, too synchronized. It did not feel like natural shielding. It felt like an effort to isolate Louis from reality itself, turning the boy into a ghost within his own home. William spent long hours in his study, tired eyes scanning internal media briefings. A chilling pattern emerged. Whenever his team prepared to release a positive image of Louis, Some technical glitch or distracting piece of news would emerge from the Queen Consort's office to smother it. Photographs of Louis beaming beside the small dogs stayed locked in archives, while surreptitiously captured footage of the boy looking exhausted, head resting on his mother's shoulder, leaked and spread like wildfire across comment forums. Meanwhile, Camilla maintained an almost unnervingly serene demeanor. She appeared at charity events with a benevolent smile, but whenever anyone inquired about Louis, she would let out a soft sigh, eyes dipping slightly as though concealing a profound sorrow. The wordless gesture carried more power than 1,000 statements. It quietly confirmed the rumors that the child's condition was far worse than the public knew. She deftly positioned herself as the sole keeper of the truth, while quietly orchestrating the suppression of any voices defending Louis across the media channels she influenced. The psychological conflict within William began to simmer into quiet fury. Through a window, he watched Louis, still innocently running across the lawn, pausing now and then to study a butterfly with pure, childlike focus. There was nothing unstable here, only a boy growing up under crushing pressure. Yet when William scrolled through public forums, he saw fierce debates about removing Louis from the line of succession to safeguard the monarchy's stability. Words like burden, unsuitable, and poor mental state appeared in relentless repetition, forming a bleak soundtrack. The abnormality reached its peak when William learned that several photographers close to his family had been stripped of access to royal events after attempting to publish pieces clearing Louis's name. An invisible web of control had been spun, and at its center stood no one other than his stepmother's office. William stood motionless at his desk, fingers gripping the edge of the oak so tightly the wood creaked. He understood this was no mere failed PR campaign. It was a systematic character assassination. The golden cage Camilla had constructed was designed not only to imprison Louis, but to prevent the truth from escaping. Every attempt William made to protect his son was now twisted into evidence of concealment. He knew that if he did not act immediately, the label of an unstable Prince Louis would be permanently nailed into the British public's mind, and his son would be robbed of a future before he had even grown up. That night, in the dim glow of the desk lamp, William began jotting down every inconsistency in the recent media directives, preparing for a counterstrike he knew would fracture the very foundations of the royal family. In the discreet working rooms of Kensington Palace, a tense atmosphere enveloped everything as William launched his secret internal review. He avoided the official security teams, whose loyalties were too tangled with other offices, and instead relied on a handful of his most trusted confidants, people who owed him absolute allegiance. William began by cross-referencing timelines. Every time Louis was absent due to health reasons, a carefully calibrated stream of half-open, half-closed information emerged from sources tagged as Palace Insiders. William's meticulousness showed in the way he pored over every file detailing the shared media team's schedules. He uncovered a calculated pattern. The covert directives sent to editors were never issued through official memos or work emails. Instead, they came as quiet suggestions over dinner parties, brief calls from untraceable numbers, or verbal instructions passed through intermediaries. Yet William found the cracks in the guest lists and travel logs of Camilla's closest advisors. Those names appeared with suspicious frequency at venues near the headquarters of the leading tabloids, right before the most vicious pieces about Lewis were unleashed. William sat motionless amid stacks of documents, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights and rising fury. The deeper he dug, the clearer the plan's depth became. This was not a mere smear. It was a character redefinition. Camilla had exploited the public's heightened sensitivity to mental health issues to pin a label on Lewis that the boy would struggle to shake off. A wave of revulsion surged in William's chest as he pictured his stepmother with her calm smile, quietly orchestrating the image destruction of a 7-year-old child. The real breakthroughs came when William obtained an unedited raw copy of a video clip, a moment when Lewis had a mild panic reaction to fireworks during a rehearsal. In the original, the boy quickly calmed in his father's arms. But in the version that circulated covertly, the embrace was excised, leaving only Lewis's wide-eyed distress stretched and slowed, overlaid with suggestive captions about loss of connection to reality. Technical traces of the edit led back to a server loosely linked to a media company Camilla had quietly funded years earlier. The revelation sent a cold current racing down William's spine. This was no ordinary political maneuvering among adults. It was a betrayal of the most basic family values. Camilla was not merely targeting the throne, she was targeting his son's spirit and future. He recalled the nights Lewis had cried through fever, the moments when the child was at his most vulnerable, and realized she had watched from afar then, patient as a hunter, waiting for prey to step into the snare. As the hours grew late, William's anger hardened into cold resolve. He closed the investigation file. The scattered pieces had finally formed a complete picture of ruthless manipulation. His gaze settled on the photograph of Lewis beaming on the desk, a smile he vowed to defend at any cost. William knew he could remain silent no longer. Confronting Camilla was no longer just about safeguarding royal honor. It was a fight for his son's survival in an environment where decency had been strangled by the lust for power. The coming confrontation behind closed doors would allow no quarter, for he understood he was facing an adversary who had never known remorse. The confrontation took place in a hushed study at Buckingham Palace, where walls draped in embroidered silk damask and antique mahogany furniture seemed to hold their breath under the oppressive weight of the air. William entered without announcement from any attendant, his posture radiating a cold, unyielding resolve. He did not take the seat opposite. Instead, he stood tall in the center of the room, like a judge preparing to deliver an irreversible verdict. On the desk, he placed a thick dossier of evidence documenting the media manipulation, its dry thud echoing sharply in the stillness. Camilla maintained the composure of a queen. She sat with hands folded neatly in her lap, her face betraying neither ripple of surprise nor flicker of unease. In the soft golden light of the silk-shaded lamp, the lines at the corners of her eyes appeared deeper, yet her gaze remained piercing and unnervingly calm. She did not glance at the dossier. She looked straight at William with an arrogant understanding, as though she had foreseen this exact moment long before it arrived. The silence that stretched between them was not a deadlock, but a duel fought with eyes and presence alone. William needed no loud accusations. His very standing there, together with the irrefutable proof in the file, was already a roar of outrage. His mind churned with images of Lewis, the child sacrificed as a pawn in power plays. Revulsion rose in him each time he met the serene indifference of the woman before him. a woman capable of turning a child's physical pain into a finely honed political weapon. When William began laying out his findings in a low voice edged with steel, Camilla remained deliberately silent. She neither denied nor admitted. Instead, through tiny gestures, a slight adjustment of her posture, a slow blink, she conveyed a subtle, sophisticated defense. In her world, every action bore the label for the stability of the monarchy. She viewed Louis's instability as a latent risk that must be managed and shaped early, no matter the cost to the child's peace and reputation. The peak of tension flashed in William's eyes when he pointed to the cruelty of the video edits. To him, this had crossed the final line. Camilla responded with icy detachment, a disdain for what she considered unnecessary sentimentality in those destined to lead nations. In her view, power left no room for softness, even when that softness belonged to a 7-year-old boy. In the decisive moment, William saw straight through the Queen's mask. Behind the rhetoric of long-term benefit lay an ambition that had burrowed deep into her marrow, an unbounded possessiveness over the royal image and future. He stepped closer to the desk, his voice now razor-sharp, declaring that the true divide between them was not strategy, but humanity. One saw a piece to be removed from the board. The other saw a son to be protected. The encounter ended without shouts or violence. Only permanent fractures had formed within the royal family's structure. William gathered his documents. His final look at Camilla was filled with undisguised contempt. She remained seated, motionless as a bronze statue in the shadowed room, an emblem of archaic, ruthless power. As William turned and walked away, he understood that this war had only just begun. And from now on, the palace doors would close more tightly than ever against those who had betrayed his trust. The aftershocks of the confrontation behind closed doors produced no public earthquake, yet they fundamentally altered the hidden currents within the palace. In the days that followed, an eerie stillness settled over Queen Camilla's office. The sharp, daily media directives were replaced by absolute silence. No official announcements, no explanations. But every close associate understood that a red line had been drawn. Camilla began a calculated retreat. She gradually withdrew from meetings concerning the public image of the younger royals. The dossiers on Louis that she had once studied so intently now gathered dust in a locked drawer. She was seen spending more time in the private gardens or taking short trips to the countryside, distancing herself from the center of power. Leaked whispers spoke of a brief, handwritten letter she had sent to William's family. A formal apology, more ceremonial than contrite, yet sufficient to impose a temporary ceasefire in a conflict that could have destroyed the entire monarchy. The swiftest change occurred in the media landscape. Social media accounts that had specialized in circulating maliciously edited videos of Louis suddenly vanished or pivoted to innocuous topics. Articles hinting at the young prince's instability were supplanted by light pieces on his education and wholesome interests. The public, ever guided by the newest streams of information, quickly forgot the earlier heated debates. They began to see Louis once more through the lens of a lively, innocent child, as though the shadows of suspicion had never existed. For his part, William relaxed his vigilance not at all. Having regained control over his son's image, he established an even stricter protective system around Louis. Nannies and media staff were now vetted through rigorous loyalty screenings. Each time he watched Louis racing across the palace's emerald lawns, the boy's clear laughter echoing off ancient stone walls, William felt a mixture of relief and bitterness. He had safeguarded his son's childhood, but the price was the complete shattering of trust in those closest to him. Yet to seasoned political analysts, Camilla's withdrawal was neither total defeat nor permanent surrender. They noted how she still occasionally appeared on a palace balcony, gazing down at the courtyard where William's family went about their day with an unreadable depth in her eyes. A woman who had fought her entire life to reach her present position would not abandon ambition so easily. The current silence might be merely a hibernation, a necessary pause while she reassessed the board and awaited a moment when the winds of fortune shifted once more. In the palace gardens, Louis was lost in pursuit of a rolling ball, his face alight with a freedom he had nearly been stripped of. From a distance, William followed every stride his son took, eyes never leaving the boy for a second. He understood better than anyone that in the royal family, peace was only a temporary state between unending, covert wars. Plots might subside for a time, manipulators might retreat into the wings, but the nature of power remained a feral beast, always ready to rise again. Louis's laughter still rang out, yet among the shadows of the ancient trees, the ghosts of ambition stood quietly, waiting. After finishing the story, in your opinion, is Camilla's withdrawal a genuine act of remorse in the face of family bonds? Or is it really just a tactical retreat to await a riper and more ruthless opportunity in the future? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.